Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Hello dear students of honors first year of the Department of English, Syed Ahmmed College, Sukhanpukur, Gabtoli, Bogra. I would like to convey my salam and good wishes to you. Hope you are well by the grace of Allah, even in the midst of adverse corona situation. I would like to welcome you to my today's online class. Today, our topic of study is The Luncheon, written by William Somerset Maugham. The Luncheon belongs to the introduction to prose, fiction and non-fiction paper. Dear learners, I think you are already acquainted with the terms fiction and non-fiction. Fiction refers to a passage or text that deals with the world of imagination. It is based on imagination. Poems, stories, novels, dramas, plays, etc. are examples of fiction. And non-fiction refers to the text which deals with the world of facts or realities. Non-fiction is based on truth, biographies, autobiographies, personal accounts, legal documents, essays, newspaper articles, editorials, etc. are the examples of non-fiction. However, the present text, The Luncheon, is a kind of prose fiction. The Luncheon is one of the finest short stories written by William Somerset Maugham. The learners, you know what a short story refers to. A short story refers to a short piece of prose fiction that has a limited number of words, very few characters, and only one theme. The Luncheon is a successful and interesting short story in that it has limited words. One can finish reading this story in one sitting. It has very few characters. It has only 2 or 3 characters. They include the writer, the lady admirer, and the head waiter. Again, this story has a well-lit plot, and its theme is the tribulation of the poor young writer while entertaining his lady admirer at Fires, a very expensive restaurant in Paris. The learners, before discussing the story in detail, we should throw some light on the brief biography on the life and works of William Somerset Maugham. William Somerset Maugham is a modern writer. William Somerset Maugham was a remarkable writer in English literature. His birth and parentage. Let us look at his birth and parentage. Birth and parentage. William Somerset Maugham was born in Paris, France, on the 25th January 1874. He was born in Paris on the 25th January 1874. Robert Ormond. Robert Ormond. Mom was his father, and Edith Mary was his mother. William Somerset Maugham's father was Robert Ormond Maugham, and his mother was Edith Mary. His father was a lawyer and handled the legal affairs of the British Embassy in Paris. William Somerset Maugham lived in Paris until he was 10. In other words, he lived in Paris up to 1884. So there grew a great fondness, a great attraction for France. It was France that taught him to appreciate beauty, wit, and humor. It was France that also taught him how to write different things. His education. William Somerset Maugham received his early education, received his primary education at King's School at Canterbury, England. Then he studied philosophy and literature at Heidelberg University, Germany. Then he returned to England and studied medicine at St. Thomas's Hospital, London. Soon he left studying or practicing medicine and entered his career, entered his literary career. And his major works include Lisa of Lambeth. His major works includes Lisa of Lambeth, Man of Humor, of Human Bondage, The Moon and Sixpence, Cakes and Ale, The Trembling of a Leaf. The Trembling of a Leaf is a collection of his essays. Then he wrote The Razor's Edge, The Painted Veil, etc. William Somerset Maugham was famous especially for his writing many short stories. He wrote over 200 short stories and became famous. The Luncheon, the present short story, is one of the finest short stories of William Somerset Maugham. This great writer died in France in December in 1965 at the age of 91. Today, we remember this great writer with pride and respect. Dear learners, let us discuss the synopsis or the summary of the short story, The Luncheon. When the story opens, we see that the writer was already in a theater and he was witnessing a play. Suddenly he caught sight of a lady. Suddenly he saw a woman, and during interval, in response to her beckoning, the writer went over to her. He sat beside her, and the lady addressed him brightly. At first, the writer did not recognize her, but when someone mentioned her name, he recognized her well. If someone had not mentioned her name, he thought he would have hardly recognized her. We, the readers, are in the dark regarding the name of the lady or the woman. Only the writer knows her name. And nowhere in course of the story, the writer mentions her name. So we, the readers, actually do not know her name. Then the woman said, it is many years since we first met. How time does fly. Do you remember the first time I saw you? You gave me a luncheon at first. Then the writer remembered the incident that happened in his life. And then he goes on to narrate the incident. It was 20 years ago, and the writer was living in a small rented apartment in the Latin quarters, overlooking a cemetery. As writer, the writer was new and young. He was very poor. He was earning barely enough to support himself, to bear his expenditures. One day, the writer received from a woman a letter. The woman praised highly one of his books. She appreciated one of his books. And the writer felt flattered. She replied thanking her. A few days later, the writer received another letter saying that she was passing through Paris and that she would like to have a chat with the writer. In the letter, she also asked the writer to give him a little luncheon at hers. The luncheon is a meal taken in the middle of the day. It is regarded as a light meal. And Fayot's was a very expensive restaurant in Paris. Only the French senators would eat there. As the writer was very poor, it was beyond his means to visit the restaurant and eat there. So he never thought of going there. The writer was too young to have learned to say no to a man. Again, he had 80 francs in his pocket. He thought that a modest luncheon would not cost him more than 15 francs. And if he discarded taking coffee for the next 2 weeks, he would be able to manage well enough. Again, the writer thought that it would be better on his part to enjoy the company of a beautiful woman in a very costly and expensive restaurant called Fayot's. Considering all this, he agreed to entertain the lady at Fayot's. After much deliberation, he sent a reply to the lady. The writer told the lady to come at Fayot's on the following Thursday at 12:30. And on the appointed day, the writer met the lady admirer at Fayot's. When the writer saw the lady guest, he became disappointed because the lady admirer was not so young as the writer expected her to be. She was, in fact, a woman of 40. She was not very handsome. She was not so beautiful. She was a woman of 40. She was imposing rather than attractive. She had large white teeth. She had even more teeth than are necessary for even any practical purposes. When the bill of fare was brought before the writer, he became startled because the prices of the food items and drinks were higher than he had anticipated. But the lady guest said and assured him, I never eat anything for lunch. A moment later, she again said, I never eat more than anything for luncheon. But in reality, she took half a dozen of costly items of foods and drinks. She took salmon, caviar, asparagus, ice cream, coffee, and finally peach. Caviar is a kind of fish egg. Caviar refers to the eggs of sea fish. It is costly. Then salmon is a very costly sea fish. Asparagus is a kind of vegetable. It was juicy and succulent, and peas and peas is a kind of fruit. The lady guest took one peach. The writer was afraid he could not be able to pay the bill. He thought that the lady guest would thought him mean if he borrowed some money from her. Then he thought that if his money fell short in paying the bill, he would put his hands into his pocket and give a dramatic cry. Alas, my pocket has been picked. Again, he planned that if his money fell short in paying the bill, he would put his watch on pawn with the manager or cashier and take the watch later on away after paying the money. And finally, the bill came. The writer paid the bill. And when he went out of the restaurant, he had not a single penny in his pocket, and the whole month was before him. In the restaurant, the writer chose only the mutton chop. It was the cheapest dish on the menu. He did not drink champagne as the lady guest did. He drank only water. And the lady guest exploited the writer by taking a good number of costly items of food and drinks. He took champagne on the pretext that her doctor won't let him drink anything but champagne. At the time of departure, the lady admiral said, follow my example and never eat anything for luncheon. The writer retorted, I will do better than that. I will eat nothing for dinner tonight. The lady guest said, you are humorist, you are quite a humorist. Jumping into a cab, she cried. The lady guest exploited the poor writer, but after 20 years, she grew so bouncing, she grew so bulky, she could hardly move. She weighed 21 stone, equal to 294 pounds. The writer had had his revenge at last upon the Lady Admiral. The immortal gods have taken a hand in matters of punishing the woman. The writer has taken revenge upon the lady guest indirectly. The mortal gods have punished her, and because of her ferocity, because of her greed, she was rightly punished. The moral of the story is that one should not hesitate in telling one's capacity, in telling the truth. Had the writer not hesitated in expressing his incapacity of entertaining the lady guest and fires, he would not have felt such difficulties. He would not have he would not have been tortured by the lady admirer. So we should bear the courage to say the right thing. The learners, the characterization of this story is very important. We will have learned that there are only two main characters, and they are the poor writer and the lady admirer. The writer was very poor, and he lived in a rented apartment. The apartment was very small, and the apartment belonged to the Latin quarters, overlooking a cemetery. He was too young to say no to a woman. When the woman praised one of his books, the writer felt flattered. He thanked her through a reply. When the lady admirer sent her another letter requesting him to give him a little luncheon and flowers, the writer readily agreed. And he was actually exploited by the lady guest at first. He had to pay the bill, and after paying the bill, he had not a penny in his pocket, and the whole month was lying before him, and he was in great difficulty. But finally, the writer was able to punish the lady guest, the lady admirer. She wept 21 stone, equal to 294 pounds. She could hardly move. The theme of the story is the tribulation of a poor young writer while entertaining the lady admirer at fires. Another important character is the lady guest. The lady admirer was greedy, she was voracious, she was talkative, she was shameless too. She says one thing but does the other, and her statements were full of ironies. Irony arises out of contrast between what one says and what one means. Contrast arises out of what one says and what one actually does. The lady guest says that she never eats anything for luncheon, but in reality, she takes more than half a dozen of costly items of food, one after another. She was shameless. When the writer and the lady guest were waiting for coffee, the head waiter brought before him a huge basket full of pieces. Without telling anything, the lady guest picked a beautiful peach from the basket and began eating it. She was shameless, and the piece was very wonderful fruit. It had the rich tone of an Italian landscape. It had the blush of an innocent girl. The lady guest took resort to pretension, and the pretense was that she never takes more than one thing for luncheon, and yet she took salmon, caviar, asparagus, ice cream, coffee, and a piece. The word luncheon suggests light food, but in this story we see that the lady guests have taken heavy meal, which cannot be called a luncheon. So the use of the word luncheon is ironical. Thus, dear learners, these are two characters, the lady admirer and the poor writer. And you must learn the use of ironies in these stories. This story is ripe with ironies and humors. You must note down the use of ironies and humors in course of going through the text. No more this day. In the next class, I will talk about another topic. Till then, Allah Hafiz. Goodbye.